throughout the campaign and at the various touch points that and the various traditional channels that that campaigns use. That's a particular passion of our first keynote speaker, someone who we welcome back, who was with us last year, Tim Cameron, who's the Chief Digital Strategist at the National Republican Senatorial Committee. He leads the digital charge at the NRSC and did so for the last senatorial cycle, 2014, where, as many of you know, they regained 9 seats and regained control of the Senate. Before serving at the NRSC, Tim was the senior digital operative at the House Republican Conference. Please welcome back Tim Cameron.
Thank you, everybody. So, thanks for the intro, Steve. You know, one of the things about this year is we've got a little bit of a tougher map, but we're looking to handle that challenge. Now, I've actually been doing this for 10 years, which may sound like really odd that, like, I'm a grizzled veteran in my field. There are a few people that work in politics that have been doing this a little bit longer than 10 years, maybe 12 years or 14 years. One of the questions I always get when I go back home is, like, do you go to college for this? And I always say, like, this did not exist. When I went to college back in 2002, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no YouTube. Those companies did not even exist, yet alone have a product. The Howard Dean campaign, the Bush Kerry 04 campaigns weren't around, and really when I went to school, like, campaigns just had like a website that was, you didn't even have an email sign-up form. And so the structure of campaigns looked a lot like this when I went to school and I was learning about politics, which is you kind of have the campaign management, you have a paid media component, which includes TV and mail, and back in the day, newspaper ads, maybe billboards. You had a communications department, and you had a fundraising effort, and you had your kind of political field door-knocking effort. And so then kind of around, 2004, we suddenly see this big change, which is, we had digital. And the really big question was, once digital kind of came out, was what do these people do? And in fact, before it was kind of busted out in a lot of campaigns, it was maybe underneath communications or part of the paid media effort or kind of fractured. But eventually it came into its own, and it's digital media. And kind of all the metrics that early in my career were built around were, how many views did that YouTube video just get? Did we get a bunch of likes on Facebook? How many followers did we have on Twitter? It was all these things that were kind of corralled just for the sake of like, oh my goodness, what do we do with this new media? How do we handle it? And we weren't really thinking through like, what is the actual real world application of this stuff? And how do we overall increase our downstream goals? How do we communicate better and get better press coverage? How do we take the door knocks that we're doing and leverage them some way? And how do we make our paid media campaigns more efficient? And fundraising was probably a very early on thing that really kind of defined digital departments, but we weren't really thinking through like downstream metrics. And we weren't really integrated. What was going on Facebook rarely lined up with what was going on with TV. And very early on, one of the things that we saw a lot was a TV ad would be dropping, and you'd kind of hear these words, hey, we need some banner ads on the fly. We need some Facebook posts on the fly. There was no really good, solid, coordinated effort. And the reason why we need a coordinated effort is because media is fractured now. When you look at how people are actually spending their time, they're not spending their time in any one place. They're splitting their time between TV, desktop, and mobile. If your ad comes on, they may be looking down at their phone, ordering a pizza on their phone, not talking to anybody, because you can do that these days with a pizza emoji, no less. And because of all this distraction, it's really important that message hit people in a lot of different ways. And when you look at how media is fractured, it even gets more fractured when you look at the mobile level, and there's more television channels, there's more websites you can hit, but people just aren't leveraging digital media for media consumption, such as social media and ESPN and stuff along those lines. They're actually doing all sorts of stuff like checking out at Whole Foods and ordering a car to come over to give a keynote at a conference. And so it's really important to realize that this technology is seamless, that people are leveraging it, and that you kind of have to get people in the moment. And that's why it's really important that everything's coordinated. So while we look at this kind of model, this is a flawed way of thinking. And I think Tim Lim, who was speaking on the previous panel, really hit it on the head. The ideal form of a digital team requires that everything must be connected. And here's what I mean by this. Digital just doesn't report to campaign management or one channel. They need to be working with everybody, and everybody needs to be working with them. And, just a few examples of this is, it's not just the digital person or the digital team, depending on the campaign side, that needs to be good at digital. The communications team needs to be good at digital. The finance team needs to understand digital. The paid media, the TV buyer, the direct mail person needs to understand what you're doing on digital. And same thing for political and field. And, just some examples of this is, does the person traveling with the candidate that's attending the rally actually know how to take an iPhone photo? Can they shoot a video? Can they create content from the event and leverage it onto something else? That's why digital just can't do it alone. And also the other thing that digital needs to realize is that we need to help these other departments achieve their goals. I often compare digital to steroids. And what I mean by this is, I could take steroids and go work out every day and get jacked like Barry Bonds, and maybe my head would get really big like Barry Bonds. But I can't hit a 90-mile-per-hour fastball. I can't, let alone the 100-mile-per-hour fastball. I'm not going to hit 70 home runs in a season. And there needs to be good core fundamentals for digital to really enhance what's going on. And so if I don't know what a communications department's rolling out with, I'm going to be weakened. If I don't know what the political and field team are doing, and if I don't know what their data is showing back to them from their door knocks and their phone calls, I'm not going to know how to adjust my strategy to complement theirs. And so, one of the things I ask everybody on all of our campaigns to be thinking through is this constant question: what is the digital component in the next step of our strategy? Because a lot of times what we're seeing, even with really good campaigns, is something will be rolled out and there will be no digital component. There'll be an op-ed in the paper, but there's no real effort to drive traffic there. There'll be, a TV ad that goes up, but digital comes late behind it and really can't complement the buy until it's almost out of rotation. And so everything that we ask our campaigns is to be thinking through this question. And there always is something that you can be doing. Maybe it's little. Maybe it's something that's just like a Facebook post. Maybe it's big. Maybe you're putting dollars behind it. You're putting a lot of time and energy behind it. And you're thinking through like, gee, we can make this little thing that we were going to do that may have been a day-long thing, and we can stretch it out to be 3 or 4 days, and we can really reach the audience that we're trying to reach. Because you may place an op-ed in a paper, and it may reach people who read that paper, but you're probably talking about that specific issue because you want to reach everybody who cares about that specific issue. And there's ways that you can leverage digital to make sure that more of those people see that. So one of the campaigns I had the pleasure of working on last cycle was the Cassidy campaign. And even though I was at the NRSC, I actually went about 15 days before Election Day, which in Louisiana they've got a 32-day runoff, or it was 32 days back in 2014, to kind of help them prepare to do this. And one of the things that I did that made all the difference in the world, in my opinion, in our success and enabled us to raise about $1.5 million online and corral a few hundred volunteers and knock a whole lot of doors, is that I sat down every single day with the 4 kind of departments that I outlaid before. And here's a really good example of how I worked with the communications team. This was from the debate. We knew a few things that I knew ahead of time. I knew everything that Bill Cassidy had prepped on in the debate and the 3 or 4 strong message points that we were going to try to make in that debate. We designed a bunch of graphics in advance of that debate, knowing that these questions were more than likely going to be asked and that Bill Cassidy would try to work them into his debate answers, regardless of whether the answers were directly captured. I also knew Bill Cassidy was going to have a really strong statement at the end of the debate. I had seen him practice this, and I knew it was going to be good, and so we had already planned to cut a video pretty much instantaneously and posted online. It was one of the most shared things that we had. And so because of that, we had a lot more ingrained communication. Now, this cycle, that may be working with the communications team to get something up on Medium, to work out and make a really big push around an Oppo drop. But as you can tell, the more in hand that you work with somebody, the better it is. On the paid media side, we complemented our TV buys on multiple devices. And we made a really strong GeoTV push that matched our mail drop universe, which I think was very important. John Adams, who's my colleague, alluded to earlier, GeoTV was a really big part of what we did last cycle. Now, as we move forward and looking ahead, not necessarily this election cycle, but probably 2 elections, 3 election cycles down, as TV becomes more and more addressable, I think we're going to see digital and kind of the paid TV environment work more and more hand together. There'll probably be a lot of data analytics around stuff called hidden Markov models and stuff along those lines, which allow you to see effectiveness. But having that same message sear in, and I'm not necessarily saying put the same creative up there, I'm talking about the same message, maybe different creative to appeal to where you're placing those ads, is extremely important. And actually knowing, and I had access to all of the TV ads that we were going to drop, and I knew the rotation dates, allowed me to inform our online ad buys and really line those up for maximum effect. Another big thing that we did, and this was one of my favorite things that we did, is I worked with the political director. I met with him every single day, and we did some really cool stuff. One of my favorite things we did is we sent out a bunch of social pressure emails to recruit volunteers. These were volunteer emails from actual volunteers who were knocking on doors. These people, they'd send emails, and a lot of times we'd form our target universe around, not our target universe, but our email list segments around who these people were. And they'd say something like, hey, I'm an LSU student, and I really have enjoyed volunteering for Dr. Bill Cassidy because he's preserving our future. And we'd look at everybody on our list who was roughly college age, and we'd send them that email. And we'd get a lot of signups. We had emails come from hunters, from people who worked in the energy industry, all making this case that it wasn't just good enough to go out and vote for Dr. Bill Cassidy, you had to volunteer for him. We also knew about every rally, pretty much the minute it was booked. We were able to leverage Eventbrite to get a ton of email signups. And the same day that the email signups came in, we would send them an email right after the rally, asking them to volunteer, asking them to donate. And this was all because we were singing off the same sheet of music. Finally, fundraising. I met with the fundraising director of the Cassidy campaign every day. Now, some of the stuff I did was pulling out our major donor list so that she could check things off of her call sheet and didn't have to go back through it again. The other thing is that we'd send out Eventbrite emails, 2 major donor receptions, and so forth. But the other thing that we did is we just found stuff that we could sell. Now, here's a really good example is this Sportsman for Cassidy sticker. I did not go down to Louisiana planning to sell this sticker. I did not even know this sticker existed. I was having lunch with the political director, and he's like, man, this sticker, you want this sticker? We've got like maybe 100, 150 left. This has been our most popular sticker. And I was like, hey, let's gather as many of these stickers together as possible. If they've been that popular, let's ask people to make a $3 donation and see what happens. We sold all the stickers. We got multiple max donors. We got multiple $1,000 donors. And we got multiple $500 donors and up. I'd say selling this sticker and that one conversation that I had with the political director about the sticker that I had no clue existed probably raised about 10 to 15K. And it's all about getting these like little singles and these little doubles that really makes a difference and really kind of shows the power of an integrated marketing strategy. So when we kind of look at this overall picture and how these things can kind of work together, the closer this team's integrated, the better. It's not just about digital having a seat at the table and making an argument why we need a budget line item, why we need to do an online advertisement. And I think a lot of folks have gotten past this. And you know, one of the things that we're doing at the NRSC, we did it actually 2 weeks ago, is that we're bringing all of our folks through, our campaign managers, our general consultants, our pollsters, and our TV buyers, and we're doing digital training with them. Because it's equally important that everybody, not just digital people, have a baseline understanding of how digital works. Because at the end of the day, I don't have a monopoly on ideas. ideas can come from anywhere. I've had good ones and I've had bad ones, but I've had really good ideas come from people who weren't digitally native. Their titles were something else. And we tried it out, and sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. But for those of y'all who work in digital know, you have to have a lot of failures to have success. And so that's why it's important for everybody to kind of have this broad baseline understanding of how digital works and why it's really kind of fundamental to kind of improving digital and seeing where it goes. And one of the things I do expect probably 2, maybe 1 to 2, maybe even 3 cycles from now is that, you know, I wonder if a digital department kind of exists within the same framework that it does now. And whether, you know, you have digitally proficient natives running campaigns and having digital silos underneath those. I know silos is a bad word, but, you know, having digital paid media specialists, digital communication specialists, etc. How these campaigns will be structured, it remains to be seen, but what we will see on both sides is probably deeper integration between everything. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
Thanks, Tim. Dan Hodges, you talked about that sports sticker, and you got a lot of response. Was there something else behind that prompted you to think some other ways of reaching this group? Why was that so successful, and why was that a surprise?
Well, you know, I think one is that message was successful with Louisiana voters. The sticker was already in demand. But one of the things I'd say about email marketing in general is we all have different activators. We all have different things that kind of trigger us to press the buy button or to press the donate button. And one of the things that, you know, we look at on our email marketing program is really trying to change things up as much as possible because, you know, one person may, you know, be driven to donate off of a long, heartfelt email. Another person may be driven to donate off of a 1-paragraph email with a very short and simple message. And so what we're trying to do constantly with our marketing is to go through and kind of activate those triggers with as many people as possible. And one of the other things I'd say about integrated marketing in general, and this is kind of outside your question, is when you look at things through a funnel, a marketing funnel, so to speak, on the integration side, you get even more powerful because, you know, when you think about kind of the baseline and you're trying to first and foremost convince somebody to become a voter, and you do that through paid media, and then you leverage paid media a lot of times to increase searches, which then you can kind of leverage into kind of your communication strategy. And then you're trying to turn those persons from a voter to a supporter, from a supporter to a volunteer or a donor. And if you have a really well thought out process for how you're going to make that happen, and everybody in this schematic is bought into it, you're going to have a lot more success. So, you know, that's kind of a tangent, but sorry. Any other questions?
This is how I keep my girlish figure.
Hi, Matthew Dibwad with TubeMogul. Tim, I was curious, you've run campaigns on a lot of different levels, both nationally, state targeted, congressionally targeted. I'm curious to get your perspective on data targeting, advertising to segments, where you're seeing the volume and the performance from those, and if you are embracing other tactics to balance against those, or kind of what your experience has been.
Yeah, well, a few things on the data targeting side is, obviously we do a lot of data targeting. I think there's kind of 2 challenges with data targeting that are really big. The first one is actually nothing to do with targeting or the technology. It is coming up with enough creative to actually effectively all of these people. We see a lot of campaigns get really like overeager about data targeting. I can target this group, and this group, and this group. And it's like, well, what are you going to target them with? And it's like, we've got one piece of ad creative for these 3 groups. And I'm like, well, why are you targeting 3 different groups? Just put them all together and be one group that you can target across everywhere. And the creative challenge is like a really big challenge for a lot of campaigns. And Part of the reason why is the creative budgets have stayed relatively the same over the past few election cycles, and they may go up a little bit this cycle, but who knows. And at the same time, the demand for creative and how many pieces of creative you need has increased. And so a lot of campaigns, I think, struggle with, do we do lower quality creative? How do we do more creative on this lower budget? Do we take money out of the buy and put it on creative so that we can do our targeting? And so I think a lot of campaigns need to figure out how much creative they can actually do, and then figure out kind of their data targeted audiences and reaching those folks. The other challenge with data targeting is a technical one, which is if you want to get really refined about it and get really exact about it, you're using services like LiveRamp where you're trying to match the cookies, and match rates might be like 40% on a good day. And so essentially you're targeting all of these people, like 40% of the people who don't clear out their cookies are getting served a bunch of ads, but they're only 40% of the audience that you need. You need like, the other 60% are equally important. Just because they clear out their cookies does not mean that they're not voting, right? They're probably actually voting more than likely than the 40% because they're the actual type of people who clear out their cookies. They're going to take the time to go vote. And so, like, one of the big challenges that we're still grappling with, and I think a lot of people are grappling with, is like, what is that mix of targeted ads that are served to a matched universe versus kind of a broader targeting to where maybe there's a little bit more waste? And, I compare it to kind of the same scenario of like cable versus broadcast, where cable you can get fairly exact, or at least exact by TV standards, and broadcast is kind of this big message. And a lot of campaigns, and most campaigns, do both. Because like you can't just rely on the cable audiences, you got to get bigger, you got to blow it out. And so, I think what you're going to see from a lot of campaigns is a mix of both. They're going to do that targeting, and I think as long as they do it through a DSP that can kind of match that up, they'll be good to go.
Tim, attribution modeling is obviously a big challenge for political campaigns. You're not going to know the end result until too late, and for a lot of reasons, you may not even know what the end result is in terms of the impact of your marketing. What sort of metrics are you baking in now to measure what ultimately and when? I mean, in the sense of what sort of back-end metrics are you expecting out of this campaign and the tactics that you're putting in place? What sort of metrics are you baking into, and what are you going to try to measure post-campaign?
So, attribution modeling is one kind of a new area of marketing, and it's a lot easier for other marketers than political marketers, because most marketers are selling something. And when you go out and you buy something, they're like, what's your name, your zip code, like what's your email? And then they're able to take all of that data and say, hey, this person we sold this stuff to was in our targeting universe and was probably served these ads and these ads. But in politics, like our sale, the vote, pull on the lever, like we know people voted, but we don't know who they voted for. We can have some predictions of what they did based off of maybe they voted in primaries, or we have a data analytics score assigned to their propensity to vote for one side or the other, but we don't really know. And so what we're looking for is really kind of the quality of an impression right now. We're looking through, based off of our ad verification software, was this served, what was its position, what was the size of the player, what was the completion rate, and was the audio turned on or off, I think are all really big deals. You can't really go off of a view anymore, and you really have to kind of think through your ad unit and think through some statistical value that you can assign to it. And differentiate that from your other buys. I'd say a view on Facebook is not necessarily equivalent to a view on YouTube, just because when I watch YouTube, my sound's typically on. When I'm viewing stuff on my mobile phone on Facebook, typically my sound's off. Now, so, it's all sorts of things along those lines. And, I think we're still probably a couple cycles away from having like enough data to where we have an understanding of what the value of each of those units is, and as soon as we have that, then Facebook will probably change how they do ads, and YouTube will change how they do ads. But right now we're really just looking for viewability and how much of the screen we had. So, and afterwards we can also look at engagements down the road. And, you know, if we can carry over cookies and eventually get a sign up, we can look at stuff along those lines. But it's still a very difficult process.
And how much are you expecting your media mix to change this cycle over last cycle? I mean, we heard in the initial panel a lot of focus on video to the detriment of display. In fact, you know, I think we've seen this across the board outside of political marketing, is that the rise of video, especially highly targeted video, is sort of diminishing the focus on display, and if anything, sort of accelerating the disenchantment with display.
Yeah.
Tell me about how your mix has changed and how you see video versus display.
I mean, display is on the way out, and I mean, a lot of times it's like a free giveaway with a video. The other thing is the ad blocking technologies that's coming out, and you know, it's not just people who don't want to be served ads, it's like the battery life of your device and the page load times on mobile is why people are adopting this ad blocking technology. So we're shifting away from that, and we are shifting towards video. And you know, I think you'll probably see maybe some more promotion of long form content, such as native content, and driving traffic to various long form content where people can really engage, and you can drive them down the supporter funnel a little bit more. But we're much more based on video now, and overall, and we've been on the record saying this before, we're encouraging all of our campaigns in competitive states to spend between 30 and potentially over 40% based off of their targeting universes of their overall campaign budget on digital. So a large share and a big difference between maybe a couple election cycles ago when we literally had people at 1 and 2%.
Tim Cameron, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to break for coffee now in about 20, 25 minutes. We'll come back and